Hello, thank you for watching this video. I'm going to try something a little different today. Instead of writing out a script, I'm going to see if I'm able to just go off of notes and try and talk a little more naturally. Of course, I'm also dealing with a panic attack right now, so probably shooting myself in the foot, but let's see how this goes. So the topic for today is the window of tolerance. Typically, the window of tolerance is explained as a window. I'm not exactly sure why people use that window analogy. The idea is that when you're in the window, you are calm, and when you are out of the window, you start to go into panic mode or fight or flight. And if that goes on for too long, then you slip into shutdown or freeze. And it's explained that at the bottom in the green is the calm area. And then you start to go into the yellow, which is fight or flight. And then you go into freeze and shutdown, which is the red. I've never really found that super useful. I think it's sort of good, but it's also confusing because sometimes I think I love metaphors, but I think sometimes they miss the point or they confuse people. Because really when we're talking about the window of tolerance, what we're really talking about is systems within your brain are being activated that release hormones and chemicals into the body to make you feel certain ways. So those 3 ways that they feel is, the first one's called ventral vagal. This is when you're calm, when you are engaged socially, but you feel connected to people. You're able to make eye contact, and on a body level, your body is able to digest food and your heart rate is calm. Chemicals that can be released here are oxytocin, which is used for bonding, dopamine, which is for curiosity, and serotonin, which is for regulation. What you can also do is, just because you're in the green doesn't mean that you're just like total zen. What it can also mean is that you can be activated in this area, but not overwhelmed, like you're still in the window within that terminology. So you might be playing a sport, you might be in a flow state where you are concentrating. You could even be like a little bit nervous, but you're still not out of your window. You're still within parameters. When you go outside of that window and you go into the yellow, that's called the sympathetic vagal. This is fight or flight. This is when your body starts to produce adrenaline and cortisol. This is to get you ready to fight or flight. It means run away. This can also be where you start to have a panic attack, your anxiety goes up. This state, you can't be in this state for too long. It's just too much. And if you're in it for too long, but you can't calm down, what your body will eventually do is go into dorsal vagal shutdown. And this is the freeze response or the shutdown response or collapse. This is when the body produces natural opiates, which I've talked about quite a few times. And you are just in zombie mode, like you're not afraid anymore, but you don't feel emotions anymore. You're just really, basically it's like being high on morphine, essentially. So I want to tell a little proverb that has kind of stuck with me. And then I think this is not exactly what the proverb was talking about, but for me, it's a good example of how do you get into the window of tolerance and how do you expand it, I suppose. And it's the proverb of the north wind and the sun. So one day the sun makes a bet with the north wind that he says that he's actually stronger than the north wind. And he's going to bet the north wind that he is. And so the north wind takes the bet. And so the sun says, okay, whoever is strongest will get that man down below us to take his coat off. And so the north wind laughs and says, okay, this will be no problem. And so he blows as hard as he can, and the man just starts to cover up and hold it tight, his coat tighter. And then he starts to rain, and he starts to send hail down, and then the man is just overwhelmed, and he's just curled up in the fetal position with his coat on him as tight as he can, and he's just crying out for help. And eventually the north wind just gives up and he says, okay, it's impossible. And he says, okay, sun, you go ahead and try. And so the sun starts to radiate warmth down, and the clouds break away, the rain evaporates, and the man stands up and starts to sweat and mop his brow, and very quickly takes his coat off. And so the sun wins the bet. So what does that have to do with the window of tolerance? To me, if you want to be in, let's say that you're in shutdown, you're in collapse, which I've been for 5 years and I'm starting to come out of. If you are being attacked by the north wind, so to say, and just you're overwhelmed, right? You can't take on anything more. You the idea of trying to do something positive or proactive in that state of mind is impossible, because you have to take things off of your shoulders before you can start to put more on. And so the idea of taking your coat off is taking burdens off of yourself. So if you want to try and get out of collapse and get into the ventral vagal state, you need to figure out some way, which might be impossible or near impossible, but you need to figure out some way to lighten your load, take stress off of you so that you can start to take on new things that would help you, like exercise or whatever. So the last thing I want to talk about is the faux window of tolerance. And this is what I'm going to call functional freeze. I didn't make this up, but this term always confused me, because when you look at the typical way of looking at the ladder of the window of tolerance, you go from calm into fight or flight, and then you go into shutdown, which is collapse. So then I was confused, what is freeze exactly? So if anybody doesn't know, of course I've got another video on freeze, but essentially freeze is this state where you are, if you were a car, you would have your gas pedal all the way down, but the brakes and the emergency brake would be all the way down too. So you'd be putting tremendous effort and energy into going nowhere. So freeze, or functional freeze, is a mixture of shutdown and freeze, or collapse and freeze. Or to put it another way, it's the dorsal vagal shutdown and the sympathetic vagal. It's high adrenaline and cortisol mixed with high opioids and dissociation. So you're kind of like a zombie, but you're also activated. And so it's I don't know, it'd be like coffee with some sort of a downer. I don't know. This is what people refer to as the faux window, meaning that people in the faux window think that when they start to go into sympathetic, which is fight or flight, they start to get activated. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're terrified and anxious, panic attacks. And then they get overwhelmed, they can't take it, and then they start to calm down. But they're not going into ventral vagal, which is, this social, calm, connected, present-minded state. Instead, what they do is they slip back into collapse or dorsal vagal shutdown. And so they feel like they are calm, but they're also able to do stuff. And so this is where the functional freeze comes in, because to them they feel calm and they're doing things, but they're also like completely dissociated and zombie-like. So they never, the problem is when you're in the faux window and you're going through this back and forth of high activation and then complete shutdown, you're never actually going into a calm, connected, aware, present-minded state. So that gets confusing to people, and it can sometimes be kind of hard to recognize that that's what's going on. Close this out. I want to give you a little something you can do that's practical and useful to try and help calm you down. This is called box breathing. This is something that people in high-stress jobs are taught to try and help them calm down. Essentially, you do a inhale for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold that for 4 seconds. And you just keep running through that cycle. But there's another element to it that I've added on, which I found helpful. In meditation, you can sometimes do what they call the om sound. But I think there's another sound that's actually a little more useful, which is the oo sound. Now, if you really focus on making that sound and really focus on trying to go as deep as you can and try and vibrate your vocal cords, that will stimulate your vagus nerve, which will help calm you down. So if you kind of do that 4-4-4-4 breathing pattern, and on the exhale, you do the oo sound or oo, and try and vibrate as much as possible, it's a good combination that helps. It's not a cure-all, but it definitely helps. All right, so hopefully this experiment didn't go too disastrously. Just to close out, thank you for making it this far and listening to this. I hope it was helpful. My dream really is to have a job. My dream is really to make a living helping people and to make the world a better place. I know that's corny, but that's how I feel. Let me know in the comments if this was useful, and you can like and subscribe and all that. Have a good day. Bye.